Everyone to the San Rafael City Council meeting. Today is Monday, October 2nd. I will request that the city clerk calls the roll.
Councilmember Bushy.
Present.
Councilmember Hill.
Present.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Present.
Vice Mayor Dianne Feinstein.
Present.
Mayor Kate.
Present. All five of us are here. We started on a closed session. Prior to this meeting, I invite the city attorney to report out.
Thank you. Good evening. No reportable action was taken in closed session.
Thank you. So welcome. We're glad you're here, whether you're in person in the chambers or listening in virtually. And as always, thank you to staff for the incredible work you do every single day to keep our city running so beautifully. As if you're a frequent attendee of our meetings, you know that public participation is very important to the council and the city. And we want to keep this current hybrid format, which is in person, as well as people calling in virtually in place. Unfortunately, there are many municipalities, including ones in Marin, that have reverted to an in-person only public comment. One of the reasons is the hate speech Zoom bombers who are targeting government meetings. Here in San Rafael, we strongly denounce hate speech and do not tolerate disruptive behavior in our meetings. We pride ourselves on the rich diversity of our residents and are committed to creating a culture of belonging where members of our community feel included, safe, and respected. We ask for members of the public to refrain from making disrespectful and hateful comments. As a reminder, comments must be on matters within the jurisdictions of the city of San Rafael and related to the agenda item. Outside of our council meetings, the city council, all of us, is available, and we do frequently meet with community members to receive input. All of our emails are on the city website, and we welcome your engagement on local issues. In terms of our council meetings, tonight we have a short agenda, but frequent attendees know that often our meetings have many items on them and It is a priority for us to receive public feedback on our items on our agenda. So the portion of the meeting for open expression of items not on the agenda will now be moved to the end of our meeting. This will also remove the confusion that we hear that some speakers have about when to provide feedback. In addition, we recognize that sometimes our meetings go quite late, so the council will be considering a resolution at an upcoming meeting to move the start time of the council meeting from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. That will be at a future meeting. We'll discuss that. So I'll close tonight's comments with a land acknowledgement that has been provided by the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. And outside of me reading this acknowledgement, this partnership continues with the tribe. And in fact, on our consent agenda tonight is one of the items that was requested by the tribe to recognize Indigenous People Day in October. We acknowledge that the present-day city of San Rafael is traditionally home to the Coast Miwok people, many of whom today are tribal citizens of the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. We thank the original caretakers of this land and honor their continuing involvement in stewardship practices that benefit us all. Here's to having a great meeting this evening. I will turn to the city clerk to describe how people can participate.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. This meeting tonight is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube, and members of the public can provide public comment by calling 669-444-9171 and use the meeting ID 844-3204-9611 # and pressing *9 to raise their hand for comment, or they can watch and comment directly through Zoom using the link on the agenda and using the raise hand feature on Zoom. If you experience any technical difficulties, you can email me at city.clerk@cityofsanterfell.org. And displayed on the podium and the projector is a 2-minute timer to help you stay within the 2-minute time frame. You're invited, though not required, to introduce yourself and say what part of Centerfell you live in, or if you're from outside of Centerfell. We are offering closed captioning for this evening's meeting on Zoom. Select the live transcript button on Zoom to enable this feature. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the city manager and council member reports. Our city manager is zooming in. City Manager Alilovich, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Mayor Kate and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Nice to see you this evening. Just a few reminders of some events that are coming up. Our last for the summer Movies in the Park is going to be this Friday, October the 6th at Terralina Park. City staff will be there around 5 o'clock to pass out free snacks and treats and talk with residents about city services and programs. The programming the movie is Monsters University, which will start right after sunset. Also a reminder that October 6th is the last day to apply to participate in the Dia de los Muertos car procession cruise and car show. That event will take place on Saturday, October 21st at 3 o'clock in Santerfell. Also, I just wanted to raise some awareness that October the 7th, Saturday, is Ageism Awareness Day. Join the Aging Action Initiative and many others to draw attention to the impacts of ageism and to reframe the conversation around aging in our communities. Also, just an update about some paving that is going to happen in areas around Ritter Street, 3rd Street at Ross Valley Drive, and the intersection of 2nd Street and D Street. There'll be some night work from 8 to 6 a.m. And then the final paving work, hopefully, if all is well with weather, will be October 9th through the 13th. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you so much. I will turn to my colleagues to report out on meetings that you've attended on behalf of the City Council. I'll turn to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. Yeah, it's been a pretty busy last 2 weeks. Some of the highlights includes the coastal cleanup last Saturday. It was really nice to see so many neighbors all over the city. I will specifically focus on the ones in Pickleweed and in the area, especially like the neighbors that they organized the coastal cleanup, and there were like many Rotary clubs that they were very involved as well. So many thanks for that. I attended also the League of California Cities conference last week with Councilmember Eli Hill and also with our city mayor. And it was just really nice to see meet with other council members and mayors from other cities in the state and learn from them. And I have a few things that I'm going to share with some of our staff members, but it was it's always very impactful. So I'm really happy that I was able to attend. Let's see. The movie in the park was amazing. Thank you so much to all the departments that were there. Like pretty much all the departments were there, and it was such a great turnout. The neighbors came over and they really came to thank the city for being available to the community and for hosting such a great event. So I wish we could do it more often, but it was amazing. Let's see. We had the MC board retreat last Friday, Marine Clean Energy, and they actually have on October 4th is the Clean Air Day. And they have an event right, at their offices. I actually have some of these posters that I'm going to share, but they have the event from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. to celebrate basically the Clean Air Day and how it's such an inspiring nonprofit organization, so well run, and everything that they are doing with the energy and clean energy and really around climate change. Also attended the MCCMC Marin County of Marin Council of Mayors and Council Members, and I know that many of our council was there as well. I'm going to let Councilmember Kurtz to talk about the specific that he was talking about, but I will mention that BCDC was there as well, and it was really nice to hear from them about the lens of equity that they have for all the projects that they are approving. City Employee Bocce Tournament. It was amazing, really fun to see many staff members there. And then I went just to finish with the celebration of Guatemala. They had a festival yesterday at the Civic Center, and it was just amazing to see so many people and really celebrate the culture, like the economic contributions, the social, the cuisine was amazing. So it was just really, really fun event, and it was the third one that they have sponsored. So I'm hoping that they could repeat it like every year. They were coming, the artists they were touring from all over the United States. So they were coming from Texas, New York. They've been all over the place. And I met the consul, yes. And also they have a new Chamber of Commerce for Guatemala in the North Bay. So that they just started in June. So it was really nice also to connect with them and see how we can keep working on, improving the businesses from our Guatemalan community. So thank you. Lots of reports.
Thank you. I'll go down this way. Councilmember Kurtz.
Thank you. I have just a couple of updates. I served on a panel of the Aging Action Initiative that was last Thursday, and we were talking about aging homeless. And the age for homeless is 50. Yeah. So that's a thing to, in terms of what we're looking at in terms of the community and how we need to work with the county a little bit differently in terms of this potential and the risk of how fragile it is that if rent goes up and if somebody's on a fixed income, it may be very difficult and throw somebody into homelessness very quickly. I attended the Boost School ribbon cutting. Boost is actually part of, and I'm going to have to read my notes because there's too many acronyms, Marin Aging and Disability Institute. This is Maddie. And Boost is a new program up at the Skyview location in Terra Linda area. It's a school for primarily meaningful access to children with mobility needs, like cerebral palsy. So there's about 7 or 8 students, but the facility is fantastic. And Spirit of Marin Awards, which was always very nice to attend. And I also just want to highlight that on this Friday, we have Monsters University in Terra Linda Park. So from Parks and Rec. So that should be nice. And I will mention that I spoke at as a member of BANJO, which is Bay Area Network of Jewish Officials. I did speak at MCCMC. I think Councilmember Hill is going to say a few words around that. So I had the opportunity, though, to share some personal experiences as well as some ideas of how our agencies can address this, because it does impact all of us. And that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Thursday, September 21st and Friday, September 22nd, I joined the Vice Mayor at the Cal Cities Conference in Sacramento. As she said, there was a great opportunity to meet with other electeds throughout the state of California at the municipal level to understand what they're doing, what we're doing, just to understand more and put it in context of what we're doing here in San Rafael. I had the opportunity to attend the League of Cities, the California League of Cities Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, where we unanimously voted the new leadership with Mayor Jeffrey Maloney from Alhambra, selected as the incoming president. This is very important to me as a serving Asian American in Marin County. So I was very happy to be a part of the caucus. On Wednesday, September 27th, as mentioned at the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members, we had 2 topics from the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, BCDC. Executive Director Larry Goldsband gave a very livened talk about what the purpose of BCDC has been and how it's evolved over the years. It was very helpful to have that understanding of where they're going. And as the Vice Mayor mentioned, the lens of equity was very important. He cited a very plausible story of the moment in the future when we will have a water incursion such that it will affect community members that are have fewer resources, and that moment would be disastrous, not just for them, but for our entire community. And he stressed the importance and the role of BCDC in preventing and mitigating that. As Councilmember Kurtz mentioned, we also had a topic on the rise of hate speech, especially here in the Bay Area. She was joined by Jonathan Mintzner, Director of External Relations at the Jewish Community Relations Council, JCRC. They provided updates and nuanced information, the why, where, what, and how of hate speech. What is not nuanced was that every member in MCCMC of every municipal elected body in Marin stands in solidarity against hate that is not nuanced. I stand with the Jewish community and anyone who is on the receiving end of hate speech. We stand united against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bushy.
And I'm sure I speak for everyone that we all join you, Councilmember Hill, in that proclamation. What I've been doing, we're in transit. We are taking a survey. There are cards outside for everyone to fill out. If you ride Marin Transit, we'd like input on how you would like to pay. We're making some adjustments to our payment plan. So we encourage everyone to fill that out so that we can have accurate information. We received a report this morning from the Metropolitan Transit Commission. They are doing a pilot program with a payment card that covers multiple transit providers. So you can go seamlessly from one to the next. It seems to be working out very well. They're rolling out the pilot and figuring out how to do the billing for the actual transit system providers. So that's an interesting development at Marin Transit. I also participated in the San Rafael Sanitation District's strategic plan interviews. We are working on going in a different direction, and the consultant is interviewing all of us to come up with our ideas. So we're very excited to see how that project rolls out. I also met today with a representative from the Northgate development proposal. There I discussed my ongoing concerns with their proposal for dealing with the below market rate unit requirements. And I think we had a full discussion of the issues. And I also participated in the MCCMC meeting at Fairfax, which led to the presentations that we had there regarding hate speech and the actions that we are taking. And I was also at the bocce tournament, and I have to say, the council put forward an enthusiastic team. We brought enthusiasm. Unfortunately, our opponents brought skill. But a great evening was had by all. So thank you.
Oh, so well put. Thank you. The Vice Mayor and I attended a Bay Wave field trip. Bay Wave is a Marin County-wide group that looks at sea level rise and what are the mitigation and adaptation measures that we can be prioritizing. The field trip was out at Pickleweed, and we walked out on the levees, and there were representatives from the county, there were representatives from other jurisdictions that are part of Bay Wave, and it was always great to actually be there and looking at the levees and seeing what are going to be the solutions and how do we incorporate the community as we go forward in those efforts. I was delighted to be at a ribbon cutting for EAH, which is the name of a nonprofit developer, EAH Center Town Reopening, which is right over here in the heart of San Rafael. It has been a affordable housing, 100% affordable housing complex since '92, and it needed to be refurbished. So it was we had a grand reopening, both the outside as well as the inside had been upgraded because it's been around for a long time. And that was a very, very joyous occasion. And there was residents who spoke about how appreciative they are to have affordable housing right in the heart of San Rafael and have us be supporting that. As you know, I'm your representative on TAM. I didn't get to stay till the end of the bocce, although as Councilmember Bushy said, our role was done because we lost in the first round. But I was at Transportation Authority of Marin. We had 2 action items. One was the Alternative Fuels Program update, which we already had here as part of our Climate Change Action Plan update. So they are going around, and TAM board also heard the update and accepted the county-wide approach to increasing EV chargers in our community. And then the other action item we took was the approval of Marin County's project list for Bay Area 2050 plus, which, boy, you look at these time horizons. And it's simply a document that we are giving to MTC to say these are the projects that we are interested in. They were not prioritized. They were literally in a big chunk. The three that I felt that were most probably relevant to San Rafael, the 580-101 interchange is on there. The San Rafael Transit Center is on there, and the Bus on Shoulder program. So if you remember, they're getting closer to that during peak commute hours to have enable the bus to go on the shoulder. So those three have been put forward for additional funding. So stay tuned. And then finally, everyone else is doing public service announcements. If you haven't heard already, the federal government will be doing an emergency test of the broadcast system on Wednesday. So your phone's going to light up. It is just a test. I think it happens in the West Coast around 11:20 a.m. So when that happens, we're all in that together. So thank you all. Thanks to my colleagues for all that you do, both on the dais, but especially out in the community. So at this point, I will receive public comment on the city manager and council member reports. And I'll look to the chambers to see if anyone wants to comment on the reports they just heard. Not seen anyone. I'll see if anyone online would like to comment on the council member city manager reports.
I do see one hand raised.
Thanks. I'd like to thank the council members and the mayor for addressing the seriousness of anti-Semitic comments being made from people outside of the community. I think it's really important. In 2017, in August, I had the honor of marching behind Ben Stern, who is then a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor. We were in Berkeley, and a bunch of neo-Nazis had come to Berkeley to try to whip people up. And Ben Stern, who was 95 years old, on a very hot day, marched down from his apartment to march with, I don't know, it was hundreds of people who wanted to show their resistance to these neo-Nazis. And it was a very diverse crowd of people that we were marching with, Black pastors and Ben Stern and everyone in between. And that's the kind of stand you have to take. That's the kind of solidarity you need. And I think it's great that you guys, are addressing this. But I would ask that you take a closer look at how you've been treating some of the most vulnerable members in your community. And I'm really, really disturbed that you ran that internment camp under the freeway for a group of unhoused individuals, and no one from your community stood up to say that's wrong. That was a majority Black and Latino camp, many medically vulnerable people. There's still no apology. There's still no acknowledgement from the city that was wrong. Jimmy Sanders died last July as a result of injuries he has sustained and illnesses he sustained in that horrible, horrible camp.
I see no other hands raised. I'll give everyone a moment. I see no public comment.
Thank you. I'll close the public comment on the reports and turn to the consent agenda. Are there any items that my colleagues would like to hold from the consent agenda?
I'd just like to notify you that I will be recusing myself from the first item because I was not in attendance at that meeting.
Okay. So City Attorney, should we take item 4A separately then in terms of the vote?
Yes.
Okay. So we will hold item 4A. Are there any comments from the public on the consent agenda? And actually, I'll take comments for all the items 4A through D, not just 4 items. Mr. Batari, come on down.
Sure.
So it's on the consent agenda is what we're taking public comment on.
But the comment is about the information technology services.
Yep, go ahead.
Renewal.
Yep, go ahead.
And minor comment, there was a reference to on page 4 of that document, the statement was workmanlike manner to a gender neutral version. They had the workmanlike manner was the word used to describe the personnel providing services in that agreement. And I understand you're trying to remove male specific gender references from your documents. And I would suggest making that change there as well. Minor change. And there was a typo on page 21 where it was a reference to service level agreement, but there was no reference to where that agreement would appear. So it's a minor thing. So I would I'll make that as well. Now, I don't know if this is part of this or another agenda item you have related to disaster planning. In that service level agreement, there's reference to disaster planning, but it doesn't include any details. It just says the service agreement says it will provide disaster recovery, but it doesn't go into detail. It's a time and materials type of service. And then your disaster in the following agenda item also references disaster, but doesn't go into detail on how you would restore your technical services and if in fact they needed to be restored.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Not seeing anyone else in the chamber. Is there anyone online who'd like to comment on our consent agenda 4 items?
I do see one hand raised.
Thanks. The Indigenous peoples item is on consent. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's item 4C.
Yeah, I noticed that you still have cars emblazoned with the slogan, "The City with a Mission." And given the horrific treatment of Indigenous people at the Mission San Rafael Archangel, I think it's probably appropriate for you guys to stop doing that. It's, you know, the architecture still stands there, and it provides structure to the community in many ways, but it is not a bragging point to say that the city of San Rafael was founded on genocide. And I do want to point out that the Catholic Church itself has I believe the bishop from Sacramento actually came down and apologized for the horrific treatment that Indigenous people suffered at the Mission San Rafael Archangel. And so it probably, if you're going to keep doing these land acknowledgements and you're going to keep doing these, Indigenous peoples resolution, recognition, that sort of performative stuff, I think you really need to take a look at why you're still selling yourself using the slogan, "The City with a Mission." It's time to phase that out. And more importantly, it's time for you to look at, the history of San Rafael and what it's really been about.
I see no other hands raised, and I'll give everyone a moment. I see no public comment.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to the council for a motion, and we'll have 2 separate motions. So someone wants to move just 4A first?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar items B through D.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dianne Feinstein.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye, that motion carries 5-0. Final motion, please.
Okay. And okay, go ahead.
I move that we approve consent calendar item 4A.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Recuse?
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dianne Feinstein.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye, that motion carries 4-0-1, I guess, for the recusal. Thank you. So on our agenda tonight, we have the City Emergency Operations Plan, and we're delighted. I see Quinn Gardner is here. So welcome. And I'm sure we'll have questions for you, and as of Mr. Viteri, you can probably answer his question too, I'm sure as part of your presentation. There you go. Nice.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Mayor, Council, pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm not talking about wildfire this evening. We're going to be talking about the city's emergency operations plan and the update that we have before you for your consideration for adoption. Just kind of a brief history of the process. The last time the emergency operations plan was updated was 2007. When I started in 2018, that was a goal of mine to start working on. And then we started that, and I actually found an old file of 19, and then the pandemic hit, and now we're here. So we have gotten this, and it has certainly been a long labor of love, and I'm grateful for all the efforts that have gone into it. So we were able to do a vendor selection in the summer of 2022, and we actually were able to work with the same vendor, Tamarack, who had done the county emergency operations plan recently, which was a great partnership in their familiarity with the area. So we put our internal planning team together in the fall and started the work on that. And we actually spent basically the last year working on 3 different plans. The only one that's public and needs your adoption is the city emergency operations plan, but we've also developed an emergency operations handbook, as well as our first hazard specific playbook. And we look forward to doing additional playbooks in the future. So within the last couple months, we've had the directors review the plan, as well as the County Office of Emergency Management, and appreciate their feedback. And now we are here. So I do want to just, again, thank the planning team, the internal folks, as well as our County Office of Emergency Management partners, and Steven's here, and he'll make some comments at the end of mine. And then, as well as our community partners, early in the plan, we went to our community response team that was formed during the pandemic that represents a lot of our CBOs and NGOs in the area to get their feedback on what they thought needed to be incorporated, et cetera. And I really want to thank Tamarack as a vendor. They've been great to work with, very flexible, just the epitome of ease when what you want working with a vendor, especially through a long planning process. So with that, kind of why do we have to do this, if you will? It is in our municipal code that it is required that we have an emergency operations plan and that we regularly update it and review it. All of our staff are part of our emergency operations structure as disaster service workers. Some get incorporated into the emergency operations center. Others might be serving in their typical first responder capacity, or like public works streets, doing a lot of great work during our storms. Just these first 2 bullets are just kind of informational in the sense that by the municipal code, the city manager is the director of emergency services, can ratify or declare emergency, and then you have 7 days to ratify that, as you've seen, unfortunately, a few times over the past few years. So what is an emergency operations plan? And I really want to emphasize this as a framework, and this was developed as part of a process. So while we have a document before you this evening, it really is about the process in developing that document, and that document is a framework. It is a flexible framework about how we respond to threats, and often in the form of an emergency operations center. It develops that internal emergency management organization and clearly prioritizes life safety, property preservation, environmental preservation, as well as cultural heritage. And it really does work in collaborations with other tools. Like I mentioned, the EOC handbook, our playbooks, as well as things like our mitigation plan, the county operations plan, and things like that. And it is a document we look to constantly update, improve from either exercises or events. What it is not is overly prescriptive or absolute. It does not dive into the tactical pieces of this specific thing will happen in this order. The EOC handbook and some of the playbooks get a little more into checklists than the tactical things, but even that is so determined by the situation. That's why we trust our professional first responders. That's why we trust the structure of the Emergency Operations Center and trained staff. It's not a standalone document. It works in collaboration with a lot of other tools we have. It is not all encompassing. It is not hazard specific. So there are parts of the plan that go over all the significant hazards we face, but it is designed to be an all hazard that no matter what's happening, we can go to this framework and adjust based on that. And it really is an internal document. So it's not really designed for community consumption. It's not designed to be outwardly facing. The public is welcome to read it, but it's not their list of things they need to be doing to prepare for things. So what does the public need to know? That we do have a plan, right? And that we train and we exercise on it. So hopefully that gives you some confidence in your local government. But that you as individuals and as community members also need your personal emergency plan. And so that's what I got to talk about, or what Manny was here last month talking about, National Preparedness Month. That's what you see us out in the community doing all the time. We are here to help. We are here to show up at community events. We will have doing our Go Bag game for the 4th, time at the movie on Friday. So we're here to help you do that. We do need our public to get signed up for emergency alerts. Mayor, you mentioned the test coming up. That's one of the systems that exists. That is a system that can force its way onto your phone per se. So please don't opt out of it when you get it. It only happens hopefully once a year. But there are systems that you need to opt into, and that's Alert Marin here in the county as well as Nixle. And then we do need the community to know where to get good, accurate, timely information. And the emergency portal managed by the county is probably the easiest stopping place for that. And that's also got a lot of great links on how to get prepared as well. And then, of course, our official social media, we do our best to update, especially during the smaller incidents and things like that are kind of more like FYI curiosity incidents rather than we need you to take action. That's going to be an Alert Marin. So there is very specific things we need our community to do, but that's not what's outlined in our emergency operations plan. So some key details within the plan. We did take a whole community approach, and that's really important to me personally, and of course, as a city. And what that means in the FEMA world, if you will, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is that you're not developing a plan in a silo, and that you're really making sure you're planning for all aspects of an emergency and all types of people with different abilities, different languages, different finances, different homeowner versus rental status, et cetera, when you're planning. Disaster after disaster, and I am, of course, a disaster geek that knows way too much about much of the history of some of them. We see that the people that were the worst off before an incident are going to have the hardest time recovering. So the more we can do to plan, right, to lessen the impacts of disaster, the better off we'll be through the recovery process. Some other key things in the plan, and emergency management plans by nature, right, they are based on best practices and standards across the industry. So there's a lot in this plan that will feel a little templated or a little standardized. And then there's some very key, unique, specific San Rafael things, such as these things I'm going over. But those things that are standard, again, are based off best practices. It's not just things we throw at a wall. We know these structures work. So we do have our succession planning for all of our directors incorporated into the plan. We go over organizational structure in terms of what the Emergency Operations Center looks like. We talk about activation procedures. So when the bad thing happens, how do we decide if we're activating the Emergency Operations Center? Who does that? To what level? How many people need to come in? How long are we going to be there for? We outline those considerations. And then we also look at roles and responsibilities, which are by department as well as by EOC function. So one of the ways we do this in the plan is this department crosswalk. So we have all the city departments as well as the different functions that they might support during an emergency based on our EOC structure. Some are very obvious. Our city attorney office supports our legal services. Some are a little more creative based on some of the skills that exist within the departments. The plan does follow all of the standards we need and should follow according to the state and federal guidelines. That includes the Standardized Emergency Management System, SIMS, as well as NIMS, which is the national. And so through this, we have that on the left, you'll see the chart from the plan that really goes from field response to local government, kind of working its way up. And so as a local government, we work directly with our county partners during incidents, and that's our liaison with the state. We don't go directly to the state. And so that's a really important component of the plan and why the plan works in collaboration with the county plans as well. And then on the right, you'll see the super broken down version of an ICS incident command system chart. And we use that same structure in our EOC. We just expanded a little bit, of course. And so we have updated our emergency operations chart as part of this plan. I'm really proud of these tweaks. I think they're much more consumable for a city of our size and our resources. We essentially now have 5 key positions within each section, which is management, operations, planning, logistics, and finance, with the ability to expand. And a key component of the incident command system is that ability to expand or shrink depending on the need, right? Not every emergency needs 30 people supporting it in the EOC. Sometimes it is maybe just me or one other person helping do messaging or making sure the folks in the field have food. It could be that simple, but we also have the ability to get into volunteer and donations coordination as an example, based on this new structure. And then our EOC handbook actually starts naming the people in these positions. So you won't see specific names in the plan. There's some guidance about positions, but we also want to make sure we have the right people with the right skill sets in some of these positions. And so as we dive into the real concept of operations, this is really the meat of the plan, and it goes through the phases. It's organized in the plan and the phases of the disaster cycle. We touch briefly on mitigation. The most important thing here is we do have a multi-jurisdictional, or essentially a county-wide local hazard mitigation plan, lots of acronyms. And we do account for continuity of government through our succession planning. We identify alternative council chambers. We identify an alternative EOC location as well. And then we dive into preparedness. So we briefly talk about the things we do when it comes to preparedness, but preparedness also relates to training city staff, to developing plans, as well as individual preparedness. And then we have a little bit as well on communication and outreach in terms of how we're working with the community. So the GOAT still gets to make it in the slide because it's a mitigation activity. So I wasn't talking about wildfire though. And then we dive into the response operations. This ties into proclamations, like I mentioned earlier. And then this is probably the meatiest section of the plan, if you will, where you dive into things about field response, our department operations centers. So what that might be is winter storms as an example. It's strongly led by Public Works. We don't necessarily need to activate the entire emergency operations center, but we might need a department operations center. So we outline that in the plan. Our full emergency operations center, we touch on resource management, intelligence. How do we get the information we need to make good decisions, to make good recommendations, to make good purchases, as well as public information. We don't template out a lot of things in the EOP. We do more specific templating of languages and public messaging in our hazard specific annexes, or playbooks, I should say. A key component, of course, of response is the alert, a warning, and this evacuation. This is fundamentally one of the most important things we can do to keep people safe. So we do touch on this, and then we're actually going to dive even more into this in our upcoming playbook as well. I do just want to take a moment. We've gotten a lot of great data over the last couple of years, especially through the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. But when we see, especially in the case of wildfire, three main reasons people will perish. And this is based on the data of, unfortunately, too many fatalities over the last couple of years. One of those is failure to get alerted, right? And that's why things like these emergency alert tests are so important. It's why we need people opting in, not just to alert Marin, but having redundant systems, knowing they have a neighbor that if they get an alert is going to come over and knock on their door to see if they didn't get it for some reason. A delay in action. They got the alert, but they decided it wasn't important. Or maybe it took them too long to herd all their cats into their trailers or into the carriers because they like to hide under the beds, right? Maybe they have a mobility need. Maybe they don't have a vehicle. Maybe it's a minor that's home after school. So they have a delay in action, a delay in evacuation, and then extreme fire behavior, which is why the work we do across the community and with defensible space is so important. So we know three reasons, and we have the ability to alter all of those reasons, two of which are directly in the hands of our residents, and we're here to empower them to do those. We do include a map for Zone Haven, now owned and called Genesis, but fundamentally what Zone Haven is doing is it's linking into Alert Marin. So it's really a tool for our responders in the field, and they can do evacuations by zone, select those zones, and then those will alert out based on your Alert Marin registration. So the public can know about Zone Haven. There is a community portal. They are welcome to see it, but it really is a first responder tool that's linking to Alert Marin in the emergency portal. So that's where those two things become the most important thing for residents to know in terms of how to get their information about alert, warning, and evacuation. And then we dive into recovery. And this is short and long term. Luckily and hopefully, right, most of the things are shorter term. Maybe it's repairing a road, maybe it's replacing a culvert, maybe it's just letting the vegetation grow back. And then we dive into damage assessments, which are really critical. The damage assessments we do right after incidents all get shared with the county, and those get shared up to the state to consider for a state or federal proclamation or declaration, which is how we get into cost recovery and how we get assistance programs activated. So we do outline our damage assessment process in the plan, and then go even more into detail in the handbook and playbook as well. So the plan is, like I mentioned, a public document. Everyone that has a specific role called out in the plan has either already seen it or will very shortly. It is publicly available on the website, and if you choose to adopt it, we'll update the version that's up there. We will have hard copies in the EOC and the alternate EOC, and then we have it on our internal SharePoint site as well for all staff that might be called to operate or to come to the EOC. And that is our EOC, at least in partial mode, up in our beautiful public safety center. So it's exciting to have dedicated space to be able to practice in, hopefully for just the most part. But we do end up in there every once in a while as well. So essentially what's next, which is staff training, which we already do on an annual basis. And now we'll be training specific to the plan, making sure everybody is aware of those specific roles and responsibilities as called out in the plan. And we do that with drills and exercises as well. We'll have our annual exercise coming up probably in the summer, I believe, this year. And then we'll also be looking at updating the plan after any incident, exercise, et cetera. And so it is that living document. When we learn something that needs to be tweaked in here, we will change it. Or if it maybe makes sense to make it a playbook, or we were missing a good outline for this after the 2018 PSPS 5-day countywide power outage as an example, we actually did develop essentially a PSPS playbook, right, in response to that incident that then we can learn from. So we're formalizing a lot of what we learned. And I think that's one of the most important things I want to highlight as part of the planning process is when we're going through this planning process, we're not creating new things. The absence of documents is not necessarily the absence of the knowledge. This is really the formalization of it. And it does give us the opportunity to have those conversations. But just because we don't have 15 different hazard playbooks in this moment doesn't mean we don't know how to respond to all of those different hazards. We have those framework work, but we'll continue to be able to document that and formalize those as we move forward. So the wildfire is hopefully our next big one, which will also incorporate evacuation, alert and warning, et cetera. So we're excited about that playbook to come, hopefully getting started here in the next couple months. And with that, I want to invite Stephen Torrance up to say a couple words. He is the new-ish Director of Office of Emergency Services. And while he's here and walking up, I'll put him on the spot and just say, I am so grateful he's here and part of the Marin team and has such a vision for what emergency management can be. And it's exciting to be able to collaborate with you. So thank you.
Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Mayor, council members. Pleasure to meet you all. As mentioned, I do want to say thank you to Quinn, Chief White as well for, taking this plan and bringing it to you for consideration. As mentioned, my name is Stephen Torrance, Director of Emergency Management for Marin County. Although we are from a different organization, speaking to the collaboration that is needed with these plans, we're here to support this plan to make sure that not only does it, to share with you that it not only collaborates with the different departments here in San Rafael, but it also works seamlessly with the county's plan. As Quinn mentioned, being able to have a plan that is also done by the same vendor is a nice and unique thing to do, but it also seamlessly works with the objectives that we seek to build. So I do want to stress that as an opportunity for us to continue the strong collaboration. Disasters and emergency response is not easy, as everyone saw in 2020, our favorite year at this point. You saw the level of collaboration that has to occur during these large scale emergencies. This plan is not only something that is going to be critical for the members of the city of San Rafael, but the greater Marin County community is able to benefit from this due to these plans being seamlessly interwoven with each other. Some of the things to highlight that I have personally had a chance to review and provide some comments to Quinn and the team, making sure that equity and inclusion are a part of this plan. That is a great step in the direction. Not only is that something that the county is doing, but the state is looking at to make sure that during emergencies, as Quinn mentioned, we have an opportunity to serve the members of the public who have the most to lose in these disasters. So being able to make sure that we have services that are curtailed and able to keep these people or keep individuals in their spaces and or keep them in a space where they are easily able to be resilient in this community. Alert and warning. Our office oversees the Marin County Alert Marin system. This system allows for us to not only collaborate with members of the city of San Rafael, but also the residents of this community. And we want to make sure that this system works for members of your community. So I want to make sure that we are also being able to be responsible for serving the members of your community with this plan. So our mass notification system, we are consistently trying to improve it, not only for the members of the unincorporated region, but also hearing back feedback from Quinn, from the members of the San Rafael community to figure out how we can continuously improve this system. So in the event that an emergency notification is needed for your residents, our team can work with the city of San Rafael to make sure if there is any type of backfilling that we need to do, we are trained and able to send those alerts on your behalf, but also that your staff and the members of this community are able to send those alerts as well. So those are things that we are doing to consistently make sure our plans are collaborating. And then the last thing I'll touch on for this plan is kind of looking at the recovery piece. As mentioned, the county has two hats that we have to serve, not only as the traditional emergency management structure for the unincorporated area, but we also have to serve as the what is termed as the operational area coordinator, where in that situation we are coordinating resources not only within the Marin County, but also with making sure that the state and federal resources can get to the city as quick as possible. So in those situations, we may be pestering, asking for damage assessments from Quinn and her team as quick as possible. But that is with the best interests of us being able to make sure that resources from the federal and state government get into San Rafael, get into Marin County as quick as possible. And these plans are critical for us to make sure that we understand the process and the protocols in order to make sure that happens for the residents of the city. So I do want to say thank you to Quinn for being able to bring this to you for adoption and or consideration. Chief White and Manager Alilovich, thank you very much. And I do want to just say thank you for our opportunity to speak on behalf of the county at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torrance. Yep, so we're set. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be a few questions of either one or both of you, and I'll start with the Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is very impressive. So thank you. I love, well, I'll do those on my comments, but I guess I love to hear, about talking about equity and inclusion. And I know that you mentioned that the plan is for city staff members. And I had a question recently by one neighbor in the canal asking me, and we are such a different city, but they said that they do like a drill in Tiburon where there is an evacuation and everybody's leaving. And I'm just thinking, wow, if we were to do that in the canal, it would be amazing. I mean, it's, first because it doesn't have that many exits, but there are so many people, there are so many cars. So how do you envision that? Because I feel that maybe that is not something I think people would be very upset if we were to do that, So do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so community evacuation drills, I think before the pandemic, we had actually done one in the Dominican neighborhood led by the community. And I think that's one of the ways we see the most success is when the community or like a Firewise organization or a neighborhood association says, hey, we want to do this, we have interest. And so we actually have a couple scheduled later this year, and I think even going into next year. We also recently supported one in Bayside Acres, which we have a few San Rafael houses there, but is mainly county. But there's a couple different ways to do those drills. And if we go back to why we see people perish in wildfire and evacuation, and we focus on, did they get the alert and did they do something right away? Those things we can even drill without people leaving driveways, apartments, homes, condos, whatever the case may be, right? We can send out a test alert, which we've done when we do drills, and we work in partnership with Stephen's office to do that. And then we ask them to practice their 5-minute drill, their 10-minute drill. Do you have your go bag? Do you have a grab and go list? Do you have all of these things? We do have a couple of drills, like I said, in the planning stages where we will be putting people in vehicles and asking them to go to like a central place and then kind of doing little community fairs there. One of the things on the back end, also to address your kind of comment about the number of vehicles per se, with Zone Haven, is it does help us break down what to expect. So it actually will say how many people, residents, and vehicles are in this area. And with that, we're able to do a little bit better traffic modeling as a result. And then when we can too, we look at, is evacuation the best tool, or is a shelter in place situation, or do we do a phased evacuation, or do we issue an evacuation warning? So there's a lot of elements there, some of which are clearly outlined in this plan. But one of the big pieces, and Stephen alluded to this as well, is making sure we have language access and making sure we have everybody signed up and that those messages are going out in the languages people need them to go out. And I don't just want to limit that to Spanish at this point. We're constantly looking at how we can evolve that, work with, have pre-scripted messages that we know are translated correctly, but at least have other ways of making sure those messages might be getting auto-translated, even if poorly, at least is enough for someone to pay attention and to seek out a trusted messenger to get more information. So there's a lot to that, and we continue to work on that in the internal way as well as the external and community way.
Great, thank you. And I have seen you in many meetings, actually, talking to the community, specifically with the Latino community. I'm curious to see how is your collaboration with the schools, because I'm just thinking there are so many families, and it's a great point to connect with them.
Yeah, so last year we did a couple different presentations with the schools. There was also a move towards the Get Ready fourth grade curriculum. I believe that it continues to kind of be emphasized. The schools are an interesting, they don't have the consolidated entry point necessarily. And so we do have to work sometimes with individual principals or facilities operators. So I think that continues to be an opportunity. We do have some good working relationships in some areas. We've done some pre-planning in certain areas. We also have been working really closely with a few of the schools, especially on vegetation management, again, so we can avoid having to evacuate. But there's a lot more to that. And I know our fire operations side of the house, as well as our police department, also have some partnerships within that to think about things like structure fires, acts of violence, things like that as well. So there continues to be opportunities in a lot of different schools, probably represent one of our biggest ones, and we'll continue to do more outreach there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Bushy, any questions?
Just a couple on two different topics. First, starting on the way we work together with others, including the county. I see mutual aid agreements referenced throughout the document. Am I correct in assuming that the terms of those mutual aid agreements will be part of the actual operations? To make that specific, the reimbursement rates and the billings and all of that is something that would be respected as part of the operations.
Yes, and I might end up speaking outside of a lane here. So for fire and law enforcement, which are the two most commonly used mutual aid systems, those systems are pretty lock solid, right? Like, I mean, that happens almost on a, if not daily, weekly basis in terms of someone need to coverage. But yes, that does get incorporated into reimbursement. If we call in like large scale mutual aid as an example, that does become our cost to seek reimbursement for. But we work closely with whatever that mutual aid entity is. When we go, as an example, out of county, that's a different system. FMAG and all sorts of other acronyms I can throw at you. But yeah, that gets incorporated here. And there's actually there's also like building inspector sort of mutual aid agreements. And there's a national program, I believe is still called SAFE. Please don't ask me what that acronym stands for. But essentially it's all of the engineers that are trained. So like after an earthquake, we can call in engineers from across the country to help do evaluations, because that's a huge process to evaluate every single physical structure in a wide area. And so there's different types of more informal mutual aid agreements there, and then there's the very formal ones with our first responders.
So that's a sort of well-known process.
Yes.
Could you contrast that with the coordinated resources that the county will be running? If I'm understanding your description correctly, the city of San Rafael, you folks would not have the ability to call for additional resources other than through the county.
So fire and law mutual aid can go direct. So that, again, that system is very clean. Like I said, they do it almost on a daily basis. We would still let the county know, especially if it's a large scale incident. It's one thing if it's maybe a small incident that needs additional, right? Like we have a partnership with Novato in terms of how we do crisis negotiation as an example. But if it's a larger incident, major flooding where we're going to need additional closures of roads and we need additional staff to help do that or something like that. Or we saw during the pandemic, we were doing a lot of staff exchanges just to help staff testing and vaccination clinics, especially with our bilingual staff. So some of that is more informal in terms of like, it's our community, even though it's a county run vaccination clinic, they're vaccinating our community. So our staff, so that partnership in that sense. And then I think some of the operations, it really depends on the incident. And so sheltering is probably the other biggest example. So if we choose locally to activate a shelter, then we would take on the burden of all things associated with that. If the county, as an example, asks us to activate a shelter, then we consider factors like, are they San Rafael residents or are we sheltering Sonoma residents, right? Or something like that. And then we start getting into different layers of who's going to pay for it, what are the agreements in place. And those are also some of the kind of annexes and subplans that exist. And so like I've personally been involved in the sheltering plan at the county level, the feeding plan at the county level. So San Rafael is represented in those countywide plans, and like the sheltering example as well. The director of library and recreation was involved in that as an example. So we try to work through all those little nuances, but at the end of the day, we're never exactly sure what we're going to need based on what happens. But it really is the relationships that we come back to, and having good documentation. And so if we have good documentation from hour zero, we can usually figure out how to clean it up and make it right when things calm down. But we all have the public service and protecting our community at the base of what we do.
Fantastic. Now I want to shift gears from what you all do to what we do. Because I remember when I was elected, we had to appoint standby council members and we had to go through a disaster training. And I looked through here for standby council members and what our jobs are, and it doesn't seem to be in there. Is that in some other plan or
you're not off the hook, council member? No, I know Lindsay, I think, has been reaching out. We've been working on getting the standby council, and we were just talking, I think, last week about needing to do that training. Some of that I'm sure got lost in the pandemic, but that is the intention, is that we'll get everybody up to date on and up to speed on getting the training for you as existing council as well as your standby council, because really a lot of, and there's some Brown Act training that goes into that in terms of what you can do remotely, how we can do emergency proclamations and emergency meetings and things like that. But functionally, the biggest piece, and if you I could tell you the page, but when you look at the big EOC chart, you're the policy group. So that box labeled policy group, with the direct line to the director of the Emergency Operations Center, that is the council. So in a lot of ways, your operations are what they are on a regular basis, right? You're advising and working with the city manager and assistant city managers in terms of what are the big picture objectives, what do we need to be sharing with the community? Do you need to be the face of that press briefing or press conference? And those are some things there, but functionally that day-to-day role stays pretty similar. It just shifts a little bit, obviously, in focus. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Mayor, thank you, Quinn, and thank you, Stephen Torrance, for being here tonight. I was trying to play this through, and obviously, Quinn, I'm resisting getting too much into counterfactual exploration, but it occurred to me that some of the documents exist digitally, and many of us take for granted that we always have a cell phone available and we can transmit voice across the infrastructure and have it sent and received. I think we can all imagine scenarios where that's not true. I can even just point to the public safety power shutoff not too many years ago when the cell infrastructure ran out of batteries and all of a sudden there was no infrastructure to use. Thankfully, I think we've mitigated that somewhat, or PG&E has. But I can imagine scenarios during which even a well-established organization like the City of San Rafael and County, while we have named folks in roles and backup and physical plans in places, that the reliance on our digital infrastructure may not be as reliable. So, again, at the risk of doing what you said not to do, which is go into the counterfactual, how would we kind of walk through that kind of scenario without that digital infrastructure?
Well, I love it. So I think Sean would say that's why we have 20 million systems and the recovery plan and everything else in the agreement that was part of consent. You'll also be pleased to know, like, your city clerk has a physical box in the EOC with all hard copies of important documents that she needs, as does the city attorney's office. So we have gone hard copy redundancy in a lot of ways. There's also just the downloads, right? So you don't have to be on the cloud. You still have battery to get to your phone, but you've got it as a PDF saved file. And so there's some advisable pieces there. We still have, I think, triple carbon copies of resource request forms in the EOC. So we still have literal pen and paper as those backup redundancies. During the PSPS, we had runners. And at that point, we co-located in the County Emergency Operations Center, which streamlined a lot of that communication. And we've also, even just at last year's, I believe, EOC exercise, we had our ham radio operators, one at the County Emergency Operations Center and one here, helping us, right, and practicing that messaging going back and forth. So if we did have cell infrastructure that was down, we do also have satellite phones and backups. So Is it 100% perfect? No, but have we really tried to hit a lot of those redundancies? I hope so. And if there are more ideas that we have failed and to document or to capture, we're happy to do so if there's other ideas.
That's super helpful. I mean, your testimony basically says that we have several mechanisms that are not reliant upon the infrastructure that we enjoy every day that we may not be able to enjoy during an emergency. And then you described Zone Haven somewhat, and I appreciated that. But maybe for what I want to recall what you said and see if this is right, which is really Zone Haven does have a presence that community members can go and download it. And for what it's worth, I did download it and tried to play around with it. And as much as I was like, oh, cool, I get to see where I can evacuate, what it really only showed was that I live in a zone that has been carved out, that I know which is the primary fire station that would cover my zone, but not much more. And I appreciated you sharing that the real value is not necessarily, it's great that I know that, but the real value is that coordinators like yourself and county have all the data that's necessary, that you can model different scenarios, that in an emergency you can actually create more directive responses to that emergency. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple live features of Zone Haven that you don't see because nothing's happening right now. So one of those is, had we been in an active emergency or had we had a zone, even an evacuation warning, when you had opened up the Zone Haven map, that zone would have been highlighted and had that information on it. So that's one. So when you get the like, oh, am I in evacuation zone itch for some reason, you smell smoke in the air, you want to see if something's happened, you could go to Zone Haven and look. And at this point, a lot of the Bay Area and California are using Zone Haven. So I wouldn't actually, if you zoom out, I wouldn't be surprised if you find some county somewhere in the state under an evacuation warning, and you could see what that looks like in real time. It does connect with Waze and some of the driving apps. And so there is a little bit more real time traffic information that can go through Zone Haven, again, in an active situation. But in San Rafael, there's not a ton of secret roads. There's not a ton of alternate routes. But again, that comes down to how we know people, especially in wildfires, can perish. And that's, if you're on a paved road, we've done a lot of work to make sure that there's buffers around you. We've removed vegetation and dense vegetation along roadsides. So if you can get on a main paved road, you're probably okay. Even if you're hot and uncomfortable and sitting in traffic for hours, we're going to see you tomorrow. And that's ultimately the most important thing, right? So there's that. And then the other thing we're still working on getting updated in Zone Haven. And there's some toggles on the back end. There's no active shelters as an example right now. We have no active refuge areas, but we do have those toggles on the back end. So if we had those activated, they would show up on that map that's public facing. So someone could go and say, hey, where's my nearest shelter? And they could look at that map and it would show up like that as well.
So based on that, would you recommend that community members consider installing Zone Haven, or would they get everything they need from Alert Marin and Nixle?
The Zone Haven is linked to the emergency portal in a way that I think the emergency portal becomes the one-stop shop. If someone wants to go to, and it's also community.zonehaven.org, could be calm, don't quote me on that. But community.zonehaven, that's the live site. Folks are certainly welcome to check that out. They can download the app, but I would much rather than bookmark the emergency portal and sign up for Alert Marin, but it is an extra layer, right? So if when we have to do the things in Zone Haven doesn't automatically do things. So it's not automatically going to change something to toggle something on or off or put something in an evacuation warning because a fire is activated. It doesn't automatically do anything. So anything that's happening in Zone Haven, somebody on Steven's team is doing, and therefore it's going to be getting updated in the portal as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
Trying to stay in my lane. Yep. So San Rafael activated the EOC during COVID.
Correct.
Right. Because I came on, well, a little bit. Yeah. And we had a plan that was from 2007. So the question is, what is the biggest aha in this current plan from the 2007 of just one thing? I'm sure there's many, but of like, where have we come in terms of emergency EOC management and plans since 2007?
It's a great question. I wish I could have slept on that one.
Sorry.
No, it's what is the biggest aha?
We'll give it to Stephen.
I think fundamentally, staff know what an emergency operations center is, right? And I can't speak to my time pre-2018. I think Jim used to joke that like I came and I brought everything with me, and I don't know. I hope that's not true, right? But I think fundamentally we just have staff astronomically more and better trained, and I think the plan represents what staff have contributed. I don't think the plan is an aha moment. I think the plan itself is documenting what we have learned over the last 5 or 6 years, and kind of what we've been forced to live from the PSPS until now, and how much we've learned. And so I think that's probably the biggest component. The flexibility of the Emergency Operations Center, what departments can do what. I think really finding, as an example, like library and rec, really finding their groove in mass care, and like, right, there's a natural connection there, but I think things like that. I think we've really started figuring out the right people in the right positions, especially through our drills and exercises, kind of really looking at the skills different departments, different people, different positions bring to it. And then I think really the emphasis on public information and the joint information centers. And we just cannot emphasize how important that is to make sure that messaging is coordinated with the county, that it is available in multiple languages, that it's got graphics that make it available. I think the other piece of that, I think places we've come since 18, we have backup websites that are in basic HTML and things like that, because we learned during the power outage when people couldn't get to our super fancy techie websites because it was taking too long to load. So we have a lot of different standby tools. We are a lot more ready to flip switches, whereas we created a lot more things on the fly as we went through the last couple of years. And then functionally that we have the ability to do a hybrid EOC. Never in my career had I done a hybrid EOC. Like functionally an EOC was the idea of you put the right people in the right room. And we had some learning curves figuring that out early in the pandemic, although it's also kind of funny to think back to those first couple of days of the pandemic. We're like, let's all get together to figure out how to solve a pandemic. And we're all sitting in the same room. And somehow we made it, right?
Excelled.
Yeah,
really, you excelled.
Yeah,
so yeah, everyone in the city. Another question. So thoughts on community preparedness. You guys know this is near and dear. On emergency and disaster response and working together. And so I'm not sure, that might be a both question. And so with all the work that we're doing with community directed preparedness, how does that actually mesh at the time during a response?
I can handle that a little bit from the city level, and then Stephen, maybe you can comment from a countywide level. And I think that ties in a little bit to Councilmember Hill's question, right? It's that redundancy. It's what tools are we giving people? How are we out and communicating with them? And for a tool like Zone Haven, right? It's a very operational tool. How does the community need to know what to do? We're really, from a preparedness to response standpoint, as an example, like we're really putting a lot of effort right now into getting followers on city social media, not because we necessarily need them to follow us to learn about, how a siren works on a fire engine, but because that might be why they follow us. But then when we have the emergency information, they're already going to get it from a trusted source. So that's a big piece of that. I think a lot of it for me is expectation setting, right? So the more we can do in preparedness, the more we can say, you do need to be ready, right? You do need to have a plan. Your plan is not call 911 and hope the 23 on-duty firefighters can go pick up 2,000 people that all need help evacuating, right? We need to have those plans, and how important that might be. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest. And then Stephen, if you want to touch on the countywide piece of that.
Sure. So, looking at this, there's a lot of times where, we go out to the community, we hear about, 100 things that communities have or individuals need to do. Part of this preparedness piece is being able to make sure that we can get as many people prepared so they can shrink down that list. So there's only 1 or 2 things that they have to figure out in the midst of emergency. And a lot of that is solved with community collaboration and preparedness missions. So we're starting to see this as our new structure in the county to make sure that as we go out, we're talking to people and they're going to say, we don't know all of these things, and we say it's okay. let's get you 1 or 2 steps better than you were today. And so that's kind of the way that we use a lot of the preparedness messaging and the collaboration throughout the entire county to get people just a little bit better. Because if we can get a neighbor to talk to a neighbor, that's a step in the right direction. So we can say if there's someone that needs support or assistance with evacuations, they know that community barbecue or that community outing allowed for us to get a chance to figure out who that person is, which will help that person be able to survive in the events of a large scale evacuation. So a lot of these preparedness programs seamlessly flow into the mitigation and response. And this is where the collaboration is definitely strong to help to achieve this mission.
Great, thank you. And I do have one more question. So 40% of our population, at least from the 2020 census, were either about half of that 40% are under 18 and then the other half is over 65. In September for Emergency Preparedness Month, the state did a focus on older adults. And I'm wondering maybe, Director Torrance, if you're aware of the state actually taking any more direction around older adults. We don't really carve out individual segments, but we do know that this is a ever-growing population in San Rafael and across Marin. And I'm wondering if the county or the state's looking at specifically some additional resources to support older adults in the event of a disaster.
So yes, looking at the federal level, the federal government has started to take the last couple of years with Disaster Preparedness Month and highlight the most vulnerable communities that typically are underserved before and during a disaster. To your point, having aging adults as part of the mission for this year has been critical because it's starting to highlight a lot of the gaps in messaging that we've experienced over the past years, and also highlighting some of the ways that we can improve. So there are some different opportunities that the county is looking to build upon to make sure that we are bringing those individuals to the table and sharing those resources with all the cities and towns. Because at this point, what we're realizing is that there are a lot of known gaps, and we're not necessarily filling them with our traditional public safety partners, but a lot of these community nonprofits who have that information to be able to bring that in, learn from them, and then be able to improve our plans on the back end. Excuse me. So with that, being able to look at the plans as we talked about, with this plan being a framework, we can start to embed a lot of the nonprofit knowledge and a lot of the history that we have from our community to say, here's what we need to do, not only for our aging populations, but our people who do not speak native English or different segments of our population who we know we need to provide additional resources. So this is all coming together, and this plan is part of that process.
Great, thank you. Okay. That's it.
Thank you. As always, my colleagues ask amazing questions. So I just had 2. I think, Mr. Torrance, you spoke to this plan that we're so in alignment with what San Rafael is doing. Is it the same for all the other jurisdictions? Because you had talked about mutual aid really going on Councilmember Bushy. So it's great that we're in alignment. That's fantastic. But I'm curious if Nevada's having the same meeting and Southern Marin, if you could speak to that.
I can intro it, but you probably have a better picture. So I think it depends on what the specific topic is. Different jurisdictions across the county certainly take different approaches to emergency management. I think I've mentioned before, we're the only city that has like a dedicated emergency manager in this context. But different cities and towns do have plans and have been invited to various planning processes. We do have the county-wide local hazard mitigation plan, and that will be hopefully coming to you before the end of the year for consideration. And that is a 5-year plan that outlines the mitigation work we're doing, and that is a very collaborative effort. And I think some of the hope with that is also that trickles into some of the emergency operations planning. But
yes. So a lot of the cities are in different positions, and this is where we're looking to update across the board the countywide plans. So all the different cities and towns have different have different starting points. For instance, the county's plan is actually in draft form. We're actually going to probably be bringing that to our Board of Supervisors shortly after the local hazard mitigation plan, but we do have a draft that looks very similar to the structure, and then also making sure that we can share that information with the cities and towns throughout the county. So everyone is in a different position, but what we're doing at the county level is trying to use this as a framework to, once we have our plan done, share that with a lot of the jurisdictions that don't necessarily have a full-time emergency management program. These plans are not short, and they do take a lot of time, and each city and town is a little bit structured a little bit different. So we were working with all of the cities and towns to make sure that they flow into the county plan, but also border to border, making sure that those cities and towns, their plans work with the different jurisdictions as well.
Right. Thank you for coordinating all that. That is a huge, massive job. And then the other questions I'd had have been answered really about language access, and you already answered beyond just Spanish, because we have a large Vietnamese community as well, and then about aging folks. And I think it's been well answered, but I want to underscore it. This is an internal document, right? And that's very, very clear. But of course, as soon as we hear it, we can't help but think about how does that mesh with the community response. And I think it's getting all of us thinking about it, because this document is really specific to our internal, and that's additional work as we go forward of how communities can get themselves to be ready. Thank you. Okay. Let's see if there's any other questions at this moment. Not seeing any.
I have a very quick one, and I just went to the portal, the emergency.marinecounty.org, and I don't see a search. Is it like a search option? So I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but maybe something to keep in mind.
I'm sure Stephen will have his team look into it. I feel like I've searched on it before, but it is designed that when there's an active emergency, that front page changes, and so you land right there. But we can definitely.
It could be me, so just saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any other questions. We'll open the public comment, and this is a comment on the city emergency operations plan adoption. And if interested in speaking, we'd love it. Yes, you're not required, but we'd appreciate if you introduce who you are and what part of San Rafael you live in.
Alvateri Gersel Park. Hello, council members. I loved your report. I read it word for word. I did, actually. You're welcome. And in listening to the questions, it's clear that this is an internal document, but I did, most of my questions had to do with how can the community complement this so they're doing things that are not in a disagreement with what you want to have done. One, there seems to be an assumption that in an evacuation, when one is required, everyone would drive. And I'm not sure that would always be the best method for evacuating. If that were the case, there are secret ways to get out of Marin. You know, there's tons of trails, etc. So that may be something to consider. In a lot of the discussion and in the plan, it assumes people who are residents, and this is a tourist town. So having some recognition for how to deal with those individuals and protect them would be something to consider. Again, AI is becoming a reality, so I don't know if it's possible at some point in the future to enable AI to allow me to log into a website and say, what do I do? And have a reliable response to that question with all the abilities that that tool provides. There was a lot of mentions about websites, and I didn't catch all the URLs. It would be nice if those were published in a single location. I did know some of the footnotes in your documentation included many of them. I did not go to any of them, but I did see those there. If they're already there, remove the question. I'm out of time.
Thank you. Great input. Anyone else in the chambers? Not seeing anyone. And again, we invite you, our virtual guests, to say their name and what part of San Rafael that they live in, if they so choose. And this is on the city emergency operations plan.
Do see two hands raised.
Thanks, Ava Crisanti. I'd like to inject a little reality check on some of the things that were said. There was a lot of congratulations about how you handled the pandemic, and I think that was misplaced. I studied very carefully what you did during the pandemic, particularly with regard to your most vulnerable residents in the SSA. Even though this wasn't, an earthquake or fire, and you had plenty of time to plan, you ended up creating a situation where not only was there no running water, no electricity, no basic amenities, no bathrooms, no toilets, but people got really, really sick in that camp, and you requested no health inspection from the county, even though I asked you to do that many, many times. I mean, the malfeasance there was severe. And so that should be a wake-up call for the competence level for what you're doing now. And, if you want to see how emergency preparedness is going to look going forward, look at those conditions in that camp and look at just the death of Susan Yoder. Your fire and your police department couldn't find an AED device. These are well compensated departments. There was plenty of time. It wasn't like this huge emergency. They couldn't find an AED device. Lynn Murphy didn't do the organizing to have an AED device on a site with 45 elderly, medically vulnerable people. Look closely at that camp, because that's exactly how you're going to mismanage the next emergency.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to close public comment and bring us back to the council for any additional comments and then a vote. So, Vice Mayor, additional comments.
Yes, again, thank you so much. I'm just like in awe, because I think some of the things that you have mentioned is so important when doing this plan, like collaboration and the relationships really working together. I love to hear how you have like the ongoing improvements based on lessons learned, because that's the only way that we can keep it current. I love the part of the recovery piece, because an emergency is not just when it's happening, but it's the after and how people react. And then, of course, the equity and inclusion during the emergencies, they are so important to make sure that everybody, our entire community, is going to be, safe. So I just really want to recognize you for the incredible work putting it together. Thank you so much, Stephen, and the county, Chief White. And I just wish that you have like a little template that you can give it to all the businesses locally, and they can also have something similar, because it is definitely very needed. So thank you so much, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. I'll go this way. Councilmember Kurtz.
Yeah, thank you for the work and updating us from 2007. So that's good. I'm going to take your quote that you've said before: disasters are messy. Right? That is something you've shared with us many times. And even with their work and our planning, which we have to do, the expectation, like you had talked about, is really clear. Disasters are messy. And so this plan, though, does lay out a plan. It lays out training. It lays out the criticality of practicing and having our own EOC. I feel very fortunate. And the level of coordination through our staff is huge. And I loved the diagram that showed who was doing what and when and where. So really appreciate it. Thank you. I think the one area that I would like to see us do a little bit more is that relationship with the school district and meeting with the superintendent, because it shouldn't be site by site. And if having somebody on the school district level in the EOC, maybe that would help bridge some of that. And so thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councilmember Bushy.
It's a great plan, always excellent to be moving forward. I'm sure it's not perfect, and there will be things that we'll discover that need to be revised, but I fully support the plan. I look forward to voting for its approval.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Quinn Gardner. Thank you, Stephen Torrance, for being here tonight. I'm going to do what Councilmember Kurtz did, which is I'm going to quote you. You self-described as a disaster geek. I'm grateful for this because we need a disaster geek exactly where you are, Quinn. I'm also grateful that we're in a position where we're not in emergency, where we can consider this together. It is inevitable that there will be a moment that will not be as pleasant as this very moment right now. So I'm glad we're doing it. I'm appreciating the transparency with which we're able to afford at this time. I really appreciated how you described what this is and what this is not. There's actually a super helpful sequence of slides that what this is that I'm taking away is, at the core of it is that we can assure the community that we have the structures in place that we have. I mean, beyond anything else, and again, I'm going to evoke what Councilmember Kurtz did, which is that we saw a series of boxes with roles, but ultimately those have names with lines of succession. And those are humans that are coming from the city, from county, from our neighboring jurisdictions that will, in a moment that they need to be activated, will be activated and show up. So I think in advance of that day, I think this community is grateful, and we're appreciative that should something happen, the community should be assured that that plan will be activated. So thank you for bringing this today, and then hope folks, when they have the time to take a look at this, will understand it better. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm glad that we are finally able to have the update 2007 till now. I know that you were thinking of ideas all those years and going through the pandemic, and this plan is exactly what we need in this time. And I really appreciated how it can flex up or down, and how the framework, how you stress that, because we don't know what's going to be around the corner. So as long as internally we are ready to respond, and with our colleagues in the county, we'll be able to come through whatever is around the corner, because we know it's there. So thank you. With that, I would accept a motion on this item.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution adopting the City of San Rafael Emergency Operations Plan.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Yaden
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye, that motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Quinn. Thank you, Mr. Torrance, for coming this evening. We really appreciate you. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we've moved the open time for public expression, and we'll just take that from folks that are in the chamber tonight. So if there's anyone in the chamber who'd like to speak on something, Mr. Viteri, did you want to speak to that? Yes, come on down.
Al Bateri, it's more of a question. I noticed in the
People, yep, there.
It is more of a question. I noticed in the Chronicle today, there was a care program that was addressing the individuals who are homeless and may have difficulty making important decisions on their health, and enabling the city to require them to go to court to find out if they need to be treated. So I didn't know if that applied to San Rafael or not. I believe I have the description of the program right. So I didn't know if you were going to incorporate that into your plans.
Thank you for your comment. And I'll just mention, because it's not on the agenda, the Care Courts is a Marin County program, and they will be around in the next phase. They'll be incorporating it. Not seeing any others in the chamber, we are going to close public comment. And we don't have any San Rafael successor agency items. So this evening, I want to adjourn in memory of Dianne Feinstein, who was a trailblazer and an incredible role model for female electeds in her long legacy that will benefit us all years to come. This meeting's adjourned.